My family believed my sister's lie in less than an hour. They threw me out of the house, cut me off from everyone I had ever loved, and let the whole town think I was a monster. 7 years later, when the truth finally came out, they didn't come back because they missed me. They came back because they were broke, desperate, and about to lose everything. Before that night, I thought I had a normal American family. We lived in a quiet suburb outside Chicago, in one of those neighborhoods where every lawn was trimmed, every mailbox looked expensive, and every family pretended nothing ugly ever happened behind closed doors. My father, Richard Carter, worked as a financial advisor downtown. He wore pressed shirts, drove a polished SUV, and spoke like a man who had never lost control of anything in his life. My mother, Elaine, sold real estate part-time. But her real job was protecting the family image. She cared about church fundraisers, neighborhood dinners, Christmas cards, and making sure everyone believed the Carters were the kind of family people should admire. I was their biological son, Daniel Carter. Growing up, I was the kid parents liked to brag about. Good grades, varsity baseball, polite at dinner tables, the kind of son who helped carry groceries for neighbors and remembered to shake hands with adults. I was not perfect. I snuck beers with friends, got into a few dumb teenage arguments, and once came home after curfew with mud all over my jeans. But compared to the things other kids were doing, I was harmless. My mother called me her steady one. My father said I had a future if I didn't get lazy. Back then, I believed them. When I was 10, my parents adopted Emily. She was 3 years old. Tiny, quiet, and beautiful, in the way that made adults soften their voices around her. My mother had always wanted a daughter, and the day Emily came home, the entire house changed. Pink blankets appeared in rooms that had once held baseball gloves. Family conversations became about preschool, ballet shoes, little dresses, and how brave Emily was for adjusting so well. I would be lying if I said I handled it perfectly. I was jealous at first. I had been the center of their world, and suddenly I was expected to step aside and become the proud big brother. But jealousy faded. By the time Emily was in elementary school, I loved her like any older brother would. I walked her into school when she was nervous. I scared off a boy who kept pulling her hair on the playground. I helped her with math homework, even when she rolled her eyes and told me I explained things like an old man. She was dramatic, sensitive, and always performing some version of herself, but I thought that was just who she was. She liked theater, art clubs, school plays, and making every small problem sound like the end of the world. I never imagined those little performances were practice for something much darker. By my senior year of college, life looked almost too perfect. I was 22, playing Division II baseball, studying business and finance, and already had a management training position waiting through one of my father's connections. My GPA was strong, my coach believed I might get a minor league look, and I had friends who felt more like brothers. I worked hard in the gym, harder on the field, and harder in class because I thought the road ahead was clear. Graduate. Maybe chase baseball for a while, then build a career in finance, buy a house, meet the right woman, raise kids, and live the ordinary American dream my parents had sold me since childhood. Emily was 15, then a sophomore in high school. When I came home on weekends or holidays, she seemed normal. A little moody. A little jealous when my parents talked about baseball or my grades. Sometimes she made comments that sounded like jokes but landed strangely. Things like Daniel never gets in trouble or everyone believes him because he's the golden boy. I brushed it off. Teenagers say things they do not mean. At least that is what I told myself. The night everything ended was a Tuesday in October. I had just finished a brutal baseball practice. We had lost a weekend series, and our coach made sure our bodies remembered it. My shoulder ached, my legs felt heavy, and all I wanted was a shower, food, and sleep. When I walked out to the parking lot and checked my phone, I saw 30 missed calls and more than 40 messages. Some were from cousins. Some were from old friends. A few were from people I barely spoke to anymore. The messages made no sense. How could you? You're disgusting. Don't ever come near her again. You're dead to us. At first I thought someone had died. My hands shook as I called my father. He answered on the second ring, but his voice was not worried. It was cold. Colder than I had ever heard it. Come home now, he said. Don't stop anywhere. Don't call anyone. Just get here. Then he hung up. The drive home took 20 minutes, but it felt like driving toward my own funeral. The radio was on some public station my father liked, but I could not hear a word. My stomach twisted tighter with every mile. When I pulled into the driveway, I saw cars lining the curb. My uncle's pickup. My grandparents' sedan. 2 family friends' cars. Every light in the house was on. Before I even got out of my truck, my Uncle Mark stormed down the porch steps. He yanked open the driver's door, grabbed my hoodie, and slammed me against the side of the truck. He smelled like whiskey and rage. "You sick bastard," he shouted inches from my face. "I should break every bone in your body." I was stronger than him. Younger. Trained. I could have pushed him off easily, but shock pinned me in place. My father and another uncle pulled him back. Nobody asked if I was okay. Nobody asked what was happening. My father pointed toward the house and said, "Inside." Now, the living room was packed. My mother sat on the couch with swollen eyes, clutching tissues like someone had died. My grandparents stared at the floor. Aunts, uncles, and family friends looked at me with disgust, and there curled against my grandmother's side was Emily. She was sobbing into a blanket, her face hidden her shoulders, shaking like she had been shattered. I looked around the room, confused and terrified. "What is going on?" I asked. My mother lifted her face. I will never forget the way she looked at me, not hurt, not confused, not even disappointed. She looked at me like I was something filthy that had crawled into her home. "How could you do that to your own sister?" she whispered. My heart stopped. "Do what?" My father stepped closer, his jaw tight, his hands clenched. "Emily told us everything," he said. "She told us what you've been doing to her for years." The room tilted. For a second, I could not breathe. What I said, "No, that's insane." "I never touched her." Emily cried harder. Without looking at me, she said, "You said no one would believe me." That was the moment I understood. My sister had lied, and my family had already chosen to believe her. Daniel tried to speak, but every word hit the wall of a family that had already convicted him. He said Emily was lying. He said he had never hurt her, never threatened her, never done anything close to what she was claiming. But the more he defended himself, the more guilty he looked to them. His mother cried harder. His uncle cursed louder. His father stared at him with the kind of shame that could cut deeper than any fist. Emily added details in a trembling voice. She said it started years earlier. She said Daniel had warned her no one would believe her because he was the perfect son. She said he had scared her into silence. Every sentence was a knife, and the terrible part was how easily everyone accepted it. Nobody asked for dates. Nobody asked for proof. Nobody asked where Daniel had been when these things supposedly happened. They simply gathered around Emily, touched her hair, held her hands, and looked at him as if he had been hiding evil beneath a clean shirt his entire life. Then, his father hit him. It happened so fast, Daniel barely saw it coming. Richard Carter, the controlled financial advisor who never raised his voice at dinner, stepped forward and punched his own son across the jaw. Daniel fell against the coffee table, tasted blood, and heard his mother gasp, not in concern for him but in grief for what she believed he had become. His father stood over him, breathing hard, his eyes wet and furious. "Get out," Richard said. "You are not my son anymore." Daniel looked at his mother, still hoping some old instinct would rise in her. Some memory of birthday cakes, scraped knees, baseball games, and bedtime prayers. But Elaine only turned her face away. Near the front door, 2 black trash bags waited. His clothes were inside them, folded badly, mixed with shoes, old trophies, and a few things from his childhood bedroom. His life had been packed like garbage before he even arrived. His father took his wallet, pulled out the family credit card, the emergency card, and the insurance card that still carried Richard's name. Then he shoved the wallet back into Daniel's chest. "You come near this house again," he said, "and I will call the police." Daniel begged them to listen. He told them they were making a mistake they could never undo. He said one day the truth would come out and they would have to live with what they had done. But nobody moved. Nobody softened. His uncle threw the trash bags onto the porch. His baseball bag followed the zipper, splitting open gloves and cleats spilling across the steps like pieces of a future being scattered in the dark. The door slammed behind him. For a long time, Daniel sat on the front lawn with blood on his mouth and cold October air burning his lungs. A neighbor's porch light flicked on. Curtains moved across the street. Somewhere inside the house, Emily was still crying and everyone was comforting her. No one came outside for him. That night he slept in his truck behind the college baseball field, or tried to sleep. Mostly he sat awake with the heater running until the fuel gauge scared him. His phone kept lighting up with messages. Some relatives called him disgusting. Old family friends told him never to contact their daughters. A cousin wrote that he hoped Daniel got what he deserved. By sunrise, Daniel understood something that would take years to fully accept. A reputation can die faster than a person. And once people enjoy believing a story, truth becomes almost useless. At first he thought it would be temporary. He believed his parents would calm down. He believed someone would check the facts. He believed Emily would panic and confess. So he kept calling. He called his mother, his father, grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins, even family friends who had known him since he was a little boy. Most ignored him. His father finally sent one message: "Contact us again and we will file a restraining order. You are dead to this family." Those words changed something inside him. Within 2 weeks, Daniel's tuition payment failed. His parents had withdrawn the money they promised for his final year. The university did not care about family disasters. Bills were bills. He went to the financial aid office, explained only part of the truth, and asked for emergency help. Without a co-signer and with almost no credit history, there was little they could do. He dropped most of his classes, picked up overnight work as a bar security guard, and tried to keep baseball alive by showing up exhausted to practice. But exhaustion does not care about dreams. His grades fell. His swing got slower. His coach noticed the shadows under his eyes. Friends who used to save him a seat in the dining hall stopped looking at him directly. Nobody said the accusation to his face, but the silence around him became its own kind of trial. Conversations died when he entered rooms. Girls stepped away from him at parties. Teammates who had once hugged him after wins now nodded from a distance. By winter, his truck broke down. The engine repair cost more than he had. Without the truck, he lost delivery shifts. Without the shifts, he missed rent. By February, he was sleeping in the baseball equipment shed with his coach's quiet permission, showering in the locker room before sunrise, and eating one cafeteria meal a day from the last of his student plan. One freezing night, his coach found him there, wrapped in a sleeping bag between boxes of baseballs and old helmets. Instead of yelling, the man sat beside him on the concrete floor. "What happened to you, Carter?" he asked. For the first time, Daniel told someone everything. The accusation, the punch, the trash bags, the messages. The way his family had erased him in one night. The coach did not interrupt. He did not promise to fix it. He only listened. When Daniel finished, the coach looked at the floor and said, "You can stay here until the semester ends. After that, we'll figure out the next step." It was not a rescue. Not really. But it was the first human kindness Daniel had received since the night his family chose Emily's lie. By spring, baseball was over for him. His grades were barely enough to keep him from being dismissed, but the part of him that used to chase a future had gone quiet. When his coach helped him get a summer job at a wilderness program in Colorado, Daniel took it without hesitation. He packed everything he owned into 2 bags and left Illinois behind. He told himself he was starting over. But the truth was darker. He was not starting over. He was running from the ruins of a life his own family had burned down. Colorado did not heal Daniel at first. It only gave him enough distance to fall apart, where no one from his old life could watch. The wilderness program sat deep in the mountains, surrounded by pine trees, cold rivers, and trails that climbed so high the air felt thin in your lungs. Wealthy parents from Denver, Boulder, and Aspen sent their troubled teenagers there when therapists, private schools, and threats had stopped working. Daniel's job was to hike with them, teach them how to build fires, pitch tents, read maps, and survive a night outdoors without falling apart. He was good at it, better than anyone expected. The kids respected him because he did not lecture them like a counselor or flatter them like a camp director. He spoke plainly. He carried heavy packs without complaint. He knew how to stay calm when weather turned or tempers rose. In the mountains, strength had a purpose again. Chopping wood, hauling supplies, climbing switchbacks, and standing watch at night gave his body something to do besides shake with anger. But when the sun went down, the past always found him. Daniel slept badly. Some nights he woke up sweating, convinced he was back in his parents' living room with everyone staring at him. Other nights he heard Emily's false crying in his head so clearly that he had to step outside into the cold just to breathe. He avoided families whenever he could. If a visiting parent brought a young daughter to the program office, Daniel found a reason to leave the room. If a child sat too close to him at a diner, he paid his bill and walked out. He had learned the cruelest lesson of his life: innocence did not protect a man from accusation. The staff at the wilderness program liked him, but they also saw the damage. On good days, Daniel was focused, disciplined, and patient with kids who reminded him of his sister in the worst ways. On bad days, he drank until morning and showed up with hollow eyes. He told himself he was in control. He told himself everyone in their 20s went through rough seasons. But deep down he knew he was not living. He was surviving out of spite. The program director finally pulled him aside after a serious trail incident that could have gone worse than it did. Nobody died. Nobody was permanently hurt. But Daniel had been slow, distracted, and exhausted. The director was not cruel about it. That almost made it worse. He told Daniel he was one of the best guides in the field when his head was clear, but he could not put teenagers' lives in the hands of a man who was quietly destroying himself. Daniel lost the job the next morning. For the next year, he drifted through Colorado like a ghost with a driver's license. He bought an old Honda Civic for cash and lived out of it when he had to. He worked as a bar bouncer in Fort Collins, helped construction crews in Denver, carried equipment for event companies, and took any security job that paid under the table. He became the kind of man employers hired when they needed someone big, quiet, and willing to stand by a door all night without asking too many questions. His body grew stronger, but his life grew smaller. He kept everything he owned in a duffel bag. He shaved in gas station bathrooms. He learned which parking lots were safest to sleep in and which diner waitresses would refill coffee without judging him. When snow came, he wrapped himself in 2 jackets and ran the car just long enough to keep from freezing. He stopped expecting phone calls. Birthdays passed. Christmas passed. 7 Thanksgivings could have passed, and his family still would not have known where to send an apology. Then one night the rumor caught up with him. He was working security outside a college bar when a man from his old university recognized him. At first, Daniel hoped the guy would say nothing, but by midnight people were whispering. By closing time, a group of men were looking at him with the same disgust his relatives had shown years earlier. Daniel did his job anyway. He cleared the sidewalk, kept his hands visible, and reminded himself that reacting would only make the story look true. After the bar closed, 3 men followed him into the parking lot. They called him names. They said men like him deserved to be taught a lesson. Daniel tried to walk away, but they surrounded him. The fight was fast, ugly, and unfair. He defended himself as best he could, but 3 against 1 in a dark lot was not a fight. It was punishment. By the time headlights from a passing car swept across them, Daniel was on the pavement, barely able to breathe while the men ran. He woke up in a hospital with broken ribs, a fractured orbital bone, a damaged shoulder, and a bill he could never pay. No insurance, no family, no emergency contact who would come. When the nurse asked who they should call, Daniel stared at the ceiling and said, "No one." After he was released, pain followed every breath. He could not work. He could barely lift his arms. He slept in the Civic with a paper bag of medication on the passenger seat and rain tapping the windshield like fingers. Something inside him, something that had held on through the accusation, the homelessness, the cold, and the shame, finally went quiet. That was the night he reached his lowest point. He drove outside town, parked near a dark overlook, and stood alone in the rain, thinking of how easy it would be to let the pain end. He was not thinking clearly. He was exhausted, injured, and empty. His phone was in his hand. No missed calls, no messages, nothing from his parents, nothing from Emily, nothing from the family that had once filled a living room to condemn him. Then a voice behind him said, "Son, that rain is cold enough without you making the night worse." Daniel turned sharply and saw an older man standing a few yards away in a worn raincoat, holding a fishing rod in one hand and a flashlight in the other. He looked to be in his 70s, broad-shouldered despite his age, with calm eyes that did not flinch from pain. "Go away," Daniel said. The old man shook his head. "Can't do that. It's not your problem. It became my problem when I saw you standing here." Something about the man's voice was steady enough to cut through the storm. He introduced himself as Frank Sullivan, retired Marine widower and apparently the kind of man who went fishing in terrible weather. Daniel did not know why he answered him. Maybe pain makes a person honest. Maybe strangers are safer than family. But standing there in the rain, he told Frank the whole story. Frank listened without interrupting. When Daniel finished, the old man said, "You have been carrying that weight alone too long. Come get dry. Eat something warm. Tomorrow, if you still want to hate the world, it'll still be there." Daniel almost laughed because it sounded impossible. But Frank held out a hand. And for the first time in years, Daniel reached back. Frank Sullivan did not save Daniel with a speech. He saved him with ordinary things. Daniel had gone too long without dry clothes, hot food, a clean couch, and a quiet room where no one looked at him like a criminal. Frank's house sat at the edge of town, small and simple, with an American flag folded in a wooden case on the mantel and framed photographs of men in uniform lining the hallway. Everything had its place. The boots by the door were straight. The coffee mugs faced the same direction. Even grief seemed organized in that house. That first night, Frank gave Daniel a sweatshirt and sweatpants that had belonged to his son who had died overseas years earlier. Daniel wanted to refuse, but he was too cold, too hurt, and too exhausted to argue. He showered for the first time in days while Frank cooked eggs, toast, and bacon like it was a normal Sunday morning instead of the end of someone's life. Daniel ate slowly, expecting questions, suspicion, or judgment. None came. Frank only said, "Eat first. Talk later." The next morning, Daniel woke on the couch under a heavy blanket, confused by the silence. For a few seconds, he forgot where he was. Then the pain in his ribs returned, and with it every memory. Frank was already awake, drinking black coffee at the kitchen table. He slid a plate across to Daniel and said, "You need a doctor, a job, and someone to make sure you stop sleeping in parking lots." Daniel stared at him. "You don't even know me." Frank looked at him over the rim of his mug. "I know enough. I know what a man looks like when he's lying, and I know what a man looks like when the truth has nearly killed him." Frank owned a small private security company that handled executive protection, high-end events, and discreet work for wealthy clients who valued silence. He offered Daniel a place to stay and a job, but not charity. Frank made that clear from the beginning. Daniel would wake up early, train, follow rules, stay sober on work nights, and rebuild himself one disciplined day at a time. If he failed, he was out. If he succeeded, he would earn every inch of the life ahead of him. Daniel accepted because there was nothing else to accept. The first 6 months were brutal but clean. Frank pushed him harder than any baseball coach ever had. Morning runs before sunrise. Strength training in an old garage gym. First aid certification. Defensive driving. Client etiquette. How to stand without looking threatening. How to watch a room without staring. How to speak to a billionaire, a drunk donor, a nervous bride, or an angry executive without losing control. Frank also took him to doctors and helped arrange a payment plan for the medical bills. When Daniel protested, Frank only said, "You can pay me back by becoming useful." Frank also made Daniel see a therapist, a gray-haired former military counselor who did not flinch when Daniel told him the story. At first, Daniel hated every session. He hated saying the words out loud. He hated admitting how afraid he still was. But slowly therapy gave names to the invisible injuries he had been carrying. Shame, trauma, hypervigilance, grief for a family that was still alive but gone. The therapist never told him to forgive. He only helped Daniel understand that what happened to him was not proof that he was broken. It was proof that he had survived something that should have destroyed him. A year passed. Then 2. Daniel moved out of Frank's guest room and into a small apartment with second-hand furniture. A clean kitchen and a deadbolt he trusted. He went back to school part-time for business management. He earned security certifications. He learned contracts, payroll insurance, client relations, and the quiet art of making rich people feel safe without making them feel watched. Frank stopped calling him kid and started asking for his opinion in meetings. For the first time since college, Daniel began to imagine a future without waiting for it to collapse. Then, Frank introduced him to Grace Sullivan, his niece. Grace ran a small contemporary art gallery in Denver, the kind of place with white walls, polished concrete floors, expensive lighting, and guests who spoke softly while pretending not to check price tags. Frank said she needed extra security for an opening night. Daniel later realized the old man had arranged the whole thing with more strategy than he would ever admit. At first, Grace did not impress easily. She was tall, sharp-eyed, and confident, with dark hair cut just above her shoulders and a way of speaking that made people straighten up without knowing why. She assumed Daniel was just Frank's quiet muscle. Daniel assumed she was another wealthy art world woman who had never had to fight for anything. They were both wrong. During the gallery opening, Daniel watched Grace handle arrogant collectors, nervous young artists, and one drunk donor with the calm precision of a woman who had built her own place in a world that underestimated her. Near the end of the night, she caught him studying a painting and asked, "Do you actually like it, or are you just pretending because you're bored?" Daniel looked at the canvas. "I don't understand it," he said. "But I respect that somebody had the nerve to put that much sadness in public." Grace almost smiled. "That might be the most honest review I've heard all night." That conversation became another, then another. A security consultation at her condo turned into dinner. Dinner turned into long walks through downtown Denver, coffee after gallery closings, and quiet evenings where Daniel realized he did not feel the need to scan every exit quite as often. Grace did not push him to talk about his past. She noticed the locked doors, the careful distance around children, the way he froze when someone used the word family, but she waited. Eventually, Frank told him the truth he already knew. "That woman is falling in love with you," he said. "And you are falling in love with her. She deserves the whole story." So Daniel told her. He told Grace about Emily's lie the night in the living room, the punch, the trash bags, the shed, Colorado, the parking lot beating, and the rain-soaked night Frank found him. He expected her face to change. He expected suspicion. He expected the old fear to return through her eyes. Instead, Grace reached across the table and held his hand. "I believe you," she said. Those 3 words broke him open more than any accusation ever had. Daniel cried for the man he used to be, for the years he lost, and for the boy who once believed family meant safety. Grace did not try to fix him. She simply stayed. 3 years later, Daniel married her in a small outdoor ceremony in the Colorado foothills. Frank walked Grace down the aisle. Daniel had no family on his side except the people who had chosen him after the world threw him away. And somehow that was enough. By 30, Daniel was a partner in Frank's company. By 31, they were expanding into 3 states. Grace's gallery was thriving. They bought a modest house with a wide porch, planted maple trees in the yard, and started talking about children. Daniel still had scars, but now he also had a life his family could not take from him. Then, on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon, his office phone rang. His assistant said, "There's a woman on line 1. She says it's a family emergency." Daniel picked up, and for the first time in 7 years he heard his mother's voice. For a moment, Daniel could not speak. The office around him seemed to disappear. The polished desk, the framed contracts on the wall, the city skyline outside the window. All he could hear was his mother breathing on the other end of the line, as if 7 years had not passed, as if she had not watched his father throw him out with blood on his mouth and trash bags at his feet. Daniel Elaine whispered, "Please don't hang up." His hand tightened around the phone. "What do you want?" There was a pause, then a broken sob. Emily confessed. The words landed so hard Daniel felt them in his bones. Not because he was surprised. He had known the truth from the beginning. He had carried it through cold nights, empty parking lots, therapy rooms, hospital beds, and every nightmare that woke him before dawn. But hearing his mother say it out loud made the old wound open in a way he was not prepared for. "She lied," Elaine continued, "about everything. She admitted it. Your father and I, we need to see you." Daniel laughed once, but there was no humor in it. "You need to see me. We made a terrible mistake." "No," Daniel said quietly. "A mistake is forgetting a birthday. A mistake is taking the wrong exit on the highway. What you did was a choice." Elaine started crying harder, but Daniel felt nothing soft inside him. Not yet. He hung up without saying goodbye. That night he told Grace and Frank everything. Grace sat beside him at the kitchen table, holding his hand while their dinner went cold. Frank listened from across the room with the same steady silence he had given Daniel years ago in the rain. When Daniel finished, Frank only asked, "What do you need?" Daniel did not know at first. Part of him wanted to ignore the call and let his old family rot in the silence they had given him. Another part needed to look them in the eye and hear the truth spoken where no one could twist it. Grace understood. She told him closure did not mean forgiveness, and forgiveness did not mean access. 2 weeks later, Daniel agreed to meet them at a coffee shop in downtown Denver. Public place. Sunday afternoon. No surprises. Only his parents and Emily. Grace came with him. Frank sat at another table near the door, close enough to help, far enough to let Daniel own the moment. His family arrived exactly on time. At first, Daniel barely recognized them. His father looked smaller, thinner, his expensive confidence worn down into something gray and nervous. His mother's hair had more silver than brown, and her face carried the tired look of someone who had spent months crying in private. Emily was 22 now. She kept her eyes down, hands folded tightly in her lap, nothing like the dramatic teenager who had once commanded a room with tears. Elaine tried to hug him. Daniel stepped back. "Sit down," he said. They sat. For several seconds nobody spoke. Then Richard cleared his throat. "Son, I'm not your son," Daniel said. "You made that clear 7 years ago." His father flinched as if Daniel had struck him. Maybe he finally understood that words could bruise too. Emily began first. Her voice was weak, almost childlike. She said she had been jealous. Jealous of Daniel's grades, his baseball, the way their parents bragged about him at barbecues and church dinners. She said she wanted attention. She wanted everyone to choose her for once. So she told a lie, thinking it would make their parents angry at Daniel for a while. But when the lie grew too big, when adults started comforting her and condemning him, she became too afraid to take it back. Daniel stared at her. "You were afraid," Emily cried silently. "You let me become homeless," he said. "You let people think I was a monster. You let me lose school, baseball, friends, safety, everything. And you were afraid." She had no answer. Then Daniel turned to his parents. "And you two, you were adults. You did not ask for proof. You did not ask where I was on the dates," she claimed. "You did not check messages, schedules, photos, nothing. You looked at the son you raised and decided I was guilty because it was easier than thinking." Elaine covered her mouth. Richard stared at the table. Daniel took out his phone. He showed them photos. He rarely looked at his swollen face after the beating, the inside of his old Civic, the equipment shed where he slept, the hospital papers with bills he had paid off one painful month at a time. Grace kept one hand on his back while he spoke. "I almost died because of what you believed," Daniel said. "Not just once. Many times. And none of you called." Elaine whispered. "We are so sorry." Daniel leaned back. "Why now?" The question changed the air around the table. Richard shifted uncomfortably. Elaine looked at him, then at Emily. Finally, the truth came out. Richard's investments had collapsed. Elaine's real estate reputation was damaged after the family secret spread through their old suburb. Emily had confessed during a breakdown, and when people learned what she had done, sympathy turned to disgust. They had sold their house, then their cars, then most of what they owned. Now they were behind on rent, drowning in debt, and Emily could not afford school. "We were hoping," Elaine said, her voice trembling, "that maybe you could help us. Just until we get back on our feet." There it was. Not love, not repentance, not a family searching for the son they had lost. A bill. Daniel laughed softly. This time there was pain in it, but also clarity. "You did not come because you missed me. You came because I became useful again." "That's not fair," Richard said. Daniel looked at him calmly. "Fair, I slept in a shed while your daughter drove the car you bought her. I paid hospital bills while you sent me threats. I built my life without a dollar, a phone call, or an apology from any of you. Do not talk to me about fair." Elaine reached across the table, crying. "Please, what can we do?" Daniel stood. Grace rose beside him. "You can live with the consequences," he said. "That is what you taught me." Emily looked up. "Do you hate me?" Daniel paused. "No. But I do not trust you. And I will not save you." He placed money on the table for the coffee no one had touched. Then he looked at his parents one last time. "I hope you understand one day," he said, "what it feels like to lose everything and have your family turn away." Then Daniel walked out with Grace beside him and Frank following a few steps behind. Years later, he would hear that his parents lost the condo, that his father took a job at a hardware store, that his mother cleaned houses, and that Emily moved to another state. He did not celebrate it. Their suffering did not give him back 7 years. It did not erase the nightmares. It did not make the boy on the front lawn whole again. but Daniel had stopped living for their apology. Grace later gave birth to a daughter with bright eyes and a stubborn little smile. The first time Daniel held her, he understood something he had never truly understood before. Family was not blood. Family was not a last name or a Christmas card or people who smiled beside you in church. Family was who protected you when believing you was hard, and Daniel already had one.